Hello and welcome to episode number 70 of the WP Café show with me, Keith Devon, and my co-host, Mark Wilkinson, who is feeling a little under the weather today. So I'll do a bit of an extended intro and keep Mark's chat to a minimum. No, I'm sure I'll have plenty of say in this week's episode. Thank you for joining us today. If you're watching live on YouTube, welcome. Please do say hello in the comments. We love to know that there are people here and engaged. As always, like we love a bit of a conversation in the comments, and we often dip into those throughout the show to try to answer questions and just highlight what people are saying in there. So please get involved. If you do like the show, please consider liking on YouTube or subscribing. And also, we're available as a podcast. So if you're listening along and you're not currently subscribed, please do consider subscribing to the show. So we've got a few topics to talk about today. We're going to chat a little bit about coding with AI, like AI-assisted coding, I guess we'll call it. Potentially some other uses of AI that we've been kind of dabbling with recently. I do understand that like the whole AI topic is a little bit saturated at the minute, and people are probably a little bit weary of it all. But as I sort of am, but you know, there's some interesting stuff going on, and we've used it a couple of times with some interesting results recently. We'll also chat a little bit about quotes. So sending out quotes for work and getting pushback on those quotes. We had an experience recently where this happened, so we can chat about that a little bit and talk about how we handled it. And very interestingly, we've had an email through in the last hour that is relevant to that conversation. So we will talk about that a little bit. And then I think just at the end, if we have enough time, we'll talk a little bit about extensibility and plugins and themes, which I know is a topic close to Mark's heart. Mark, are you ready to say any words?
I am ready to say words. Yeah, I've just got a really bad cold, bad headache, but I'll muscle through. I'm all right. So we'll see.
Other
If you
than
hear any
that,
coughing and spluttering and sneezing and sniffling, then it's me. I'm sorry.
so other than that, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. A good week this week. I enjoyed it.
Yep.
Done some good stuff. Done some development, which is always nice.
Yep.
Which is good to get stuck into. Got a few projects on the go with one of our big clients. Got some things to do on that, which has been nice.
Yeah.
And more integrations of our product job relay and more inquiries about RecPress, which has been really good. So yeah, all the good stuff.
It was interesting. It's not a topic, but that I listed. But it was interesting this week. We had a monthly call with one of our clients, and turns out that we were kind of leaving quite a lot of money on the table. He'd asked us to quote for a few things last month, and we hadn't done it. You know, and it was like on that call, he's like, you know, am I sending you too much work or something like that? And it's like, no, we just haven't. I don't know why. I don't, you know. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. That like, make sure if people are trying to give you money, you're a bit more proactive than we have been in the last month. Little mini lesson for us there. Don't leave money on the table when it's like available.
For sure.
Coding AI. What have you been up to regarding this recently? What are your experiences?
So probably 2-3 months ago, maybe more actually, maybe less. Not sure. I installed and subscribed to the GitHub Copilot AI thing tool, whatever it is. I think it's £10 a month, or it might be $10 a month. It's one or the other. And you get a free trial for a month as well, so you can give it a shot if you wanted to. And it installs into your code editor. So I use Visual Studio, and you install it, and it's really easy because I managed to install it. Often these things are quite convoluted, but this is really easy. And it kind of watches what you code in and suggests things and answers things, and it is remarkably clever. I can't get over how good it is and how good it has learnt what I am coding and the sort of things I'm doing, and then how it's obviously suggesting for things like that. And I think it's got me thinking that it really changes the way you code, because I don't know about you guys when you're coding, but you look up so many things. We're not all sponges. We don't remember everything. So how do I do a switch statement, or how do I get the terms of a post in WordPress? You've got to sort of sometimes work it out and go and have a look. So you jump onto the codex, or you'd bang it into Google, and then you'd get so many resources and you'd find the answer. Whereas now I just find myself literally typing a comment in PHP, get post terms, and then press enter, and then GitHub Copilot literally puts the right code in, usually the right code in, literally for what I want to do. And then you just hit tab, and then you're off and running, basically. And it's how it's been and learned what I do, and the way in which I write the code as well has been incredible. So it's such a time saver.
Do you think it's been? Is it specific to you? Do you feel like it's picking up your coding, or do you feel like it just knows what you're trying to do and it knows best practices? And
well, it feels like it's knowing my coding. Whether it actually is or not, obviously, I don't know. But it feels like it's giving suggestions for the thing that I'm working on and for the project that I'm working on, which I guess is quite plausible. It could be, because it can presumably see all the code in my project, and can see other repositories maybe that I've got in GitHub that it knows the sort of things that I don't know, but it does feel like that. Yeah, definitely. But it's also been really good for stuff that, like, I don't write a lot of JavaScript. I do write some, but I don't write a lot of JavaScript. And when I do write JavaScript, I find myself thinking, like, what do I want to do? So I might think, well, I need to search for this string within this string and replace it with something else. And like, I just don't know how to write it in JavaScript. So I think about writing it in PHP and what you're doing there. And then I'd have to go and look it up, how do you do this in JavaScript? And then someone would, you can find an article on it or whatever. Whereas now I can just type the comment and it literally, it tells me how to do it straight away. So it's been much, much quicker to code, much, much quicker to code. Remember yesterday we were on a call, and we were integrating a RecPress site, and we wanted to write a little shortcode that would output something in Elementor for us, because we couldn't get Elementor to do it. It should have worked, doesn't it? It should have this dynamic tags ability where you can pull data from a post, but it didn't want to show our taxonomy. So I said, let's just write a little shortcode to output this, and we can stick that in a text block. And it literally took me about 4 minutes to write this shortcode, even less than that, just because GitHub Copilot essentially wrote a lot of it for me. And then I'm just checking it over and seeing if it's working. So, yeah, if you haven't investigated it, I would highly recommend it. I do think it's worth £10 a month. It will save you a lot of time. But yeah, give it a go. You get a free trial, so it's worth just giving it a go, if not, just to see what it is for you.
Yeah, sounds really good. Pixels and Things Plays is commented. I've been using Copilot more each week. Really useful. It's like having autocomplete within the editor. That's pretty much exactly what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's kind of more intelligent and better than autocomplete. It has context for what you're doing and what you've asked it to do. So I comment my code a lot. Controversial to some people, but I comment almost every line as to what it's trying to do. And I do think that helps the Copilot to understand what code you might want to put next. It seems to be that's the case. So that certainly helped me with the comments, definitely.
Yeah. Elliot has commented, AI in coding is super handy. It's definitely halved the time it takes for me to code. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's massive. He says, I use Cody, which is a LLM, large language model, that learns your code base. You can let it loose on any code base. Interesting, Elliot. Why did you choose Cody rather than something like GitHub Copilot? Interested to know the differences, if you know. Yeah, super, super interesting. So I'm not using Copilot currently. Maybe I should be, but a lot of my work is kind of more front end. I don't know if it works with CSS. Maybe. I don't know how. Maybe. I should probably look into that. And I do JavaScript work, so I could use it for that. But I did use ChatGPT recently. I've got a ChatGPT window just constantly open now. and I just find myself just using it for more and more things. And actually, I wish I used it more than I did. There's so many times I'm like, why didn't I not just throw that in the ChatGPT and see what it said? So there's a interesting little scenario this week where we wanted to take a bit of code actually from another plugin, this tiny little snippet, this little function, and incorporate it into RecPress. But we looked at this function and it was jQuery. I was like, oh god, I don't want it to be jQuery within RecPress. I don't want to be relying on that. I'll make it native JavaScript. It's fine. And I thought, oh, bet ChatGPT could do that in like 3 seconds. So I just said, can you convert the following into native JavaScript, i.e. not jQuery? Please explain the changes that you make. I find that asking ChatGPT to explain what it's doing is really, really useful, because then you can potentially catch things that it's not doing right, or like potential like consequences of things that you might not have thought about. So I just pasted it in the code, and then it just gave me this code. We tested it; it worked straight away. But then I found that actually that little snippet didn't cover a particular circumstance. So it was a click event. When you click submit on this form, such and such happens. And actually I needed that to be also fire whenever the form is submitted by pressing the enter key. So I thought, okay, I wonder if I can get ChatGPT to do that as well. And interestingly, and it's probably because of the quality of my prompting as well, but it gave me the original function, and then it gave me a add event listener function for an enter key. If the focus is currently on one of the form elements, but then didn't run that same function. So it was like, then put your code here, what you want to run when the enter key is pressed. And I was like, well, I want to run the same code that you wrote before. So I told it that. I said, hi, I want the same code to be run for the 2 events, i.e. the click event and the enter key down event should both fire the same code. ChatGPT comes back and say, I understand your request to run the same code, blah, blah, blah. Here's the updated code. And again, there was something wrong with this as well. So there was like, and then I said, so in both scenarios, the data href is present on the submit button element. Can you modify the above code to reflect that? Because it was starting to look for things in really weird ways. So we basically passed the href that it needs to run the function on the submit button, and it was looking for it somewhere else, not on the submit button, or asking for it to be passed in a different way. So things weren't kind of quite right. So again, I asked the question. ChatGPT came back with an answer that wasn't quite right. One of them being that I asked it to look for a class that started with a particular string, and it was just looking for the class of that string. So I said that. I was like, I want to look for the class that starts with that string. Again, and then it came back. I said, please regenerate your code to reflect that. It did it. That was pretty good. And then it changed. While it did that, it changed something that was working before. So then I said, no, the click event should only be fired when clicking this button. It was now fired every time you pressed a form field or something like that. So it it's not intelligent. It doesn't really know what it's doing, and we've got to remember that when we're working with these tools. And I said, but this was correct in your previous examples. Can you make it only fire on click of this button? It apologized for the confusion, which I thought was very polite. And then
That's
gave me,
because you were saying please.
and then gave me a new bit of code. Tried it, worked. I was polite back. I said, nice, that's working. And then on your point about comments, Mark, I just said, can you please add brief comments to the code to describe what is happening? And it gave me a commented exactly. It gave me a commented version, and the comments were really, really sensible and like
cool.
well positioned in the code, and so there you go. It was pretty fascinating. I would say though, I don't know, it saved me loads and loads of time because I had to go through all those steps. It probably did. Like,
I think it probably would have.
But if it got it like bang on straight away, it would obviously be amazing. But like I say, it doesn't. I didn't give it that much context, so it did a pretty damn good job.
It's interesting looking at the example I mentioned previously was the when I wrote the shortcode yesterday, though, because when we first pasted that into the site to run it,
Yeah.
it didn't run, did it? Nothing got output.
Well, that's
No, sorry, it did run, and everything got output, but it had screwed up the page layout of the page.
yeah.
So it was like, what's going on there? So I had a look at the code again, and you pasted it into ChatGPT, didn't you?
I did.
And said, like, what's wrong with this code? And it basically came back and said, like, nothing. You're doing this right. You've started output buffering. You're cleaning the buffer when you return it, and so forth like that.
Yeah.
When I looked at the code, I'd actually written the comment that says start output buffering, but I hadn't actually done op start, so it didn't. But ChatGPT thought that it had.
I'll tell you exactly what it said. So in the code you wrote a comment like you said, start buffering the output, and then there was nothing underneath that. So that was a comment. And in ChatGPT's response to is there anything wrong with this code, it said buffering. The code correctly starts output buffering with OB start. No, it didn't. It didn't. And then I asked it afterwards, are you sure the output buffering is correct? I apologize for the confusion. Upon closer examination, there's an issue with the output buffering in your code. Specifically, it's missing the initial OB start function at the start of the buffering. So fascinating. Like, in one sense, it seems so clever and so intelligent, but it just gets stuff wrong. It's like having a junior developer. Like just acting instantly on whatever you want it to act on. I say junior. I mean, it's better in terms of knowledge than a junior, but it gets stuff wrong.
Use it right, haven't you? That's the key. I think your prompts are really important to what you ask it, and I think, like you said, asking it for reasons as well. Because if it gives reasons that you don't agree with, then you might think it's wrong, and therefore you can kind of work it out. But I think it's a great starting tool, if nothing else, and it's definitely speeded things up for me, and sounds like it has for you as well. So
should we jump into some comments?
Go for it.
So Elliot has followed up with my question about why he uses Kodi instead of Copilot. He says, I use Copilot as well. I just got a free trial for Kodi and loved it so much. Any Git repo can be fed into it. So if you're unfamiliar with a code base, it will learn it for you. Mm-hmm. And then he also says, the important thing about AI is to know what code you're asking for. You need an understanding of what AI is giving you. Yeah. It's not perfect, so you'll still need an understanding of what it's churning. I sometimes simply ask for an example. I then cherry pick what I need. I couldn't rely on what AI initially feeds back. Exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't be throwing that stuff directly into any production code without doing some serious checks first. Cameron Jones. Hi, Cameron. Just on my point there about my form JavaScript, why not just check for form submissions instead of clicking and hitting buttons? It's because it's not actually a form. This is some third-party output that already has its own JavaScript running that we're basically trying to intercept and do something differently with. So I don't think there is a form submit. It's all done with their JavaScript, which we're hijacking, essentially. So otherwise I would have done something like that if it had been available.
But it works well at the moment. Anyway, we'll have to test it, but it's working well.
Yeah, really good. So
just a little add-on to RecPress, which will help.
Just trying to think what else I've been using ChatGPT for recently.
You had an example. You was telling me about using it with calls and transcripts and things, but we haven't done it yet. But something you mentioned that would be interesting to do.
Oh yeah.
If we could record our calls with potential customers for our products, and then it produces a transcript for you, then you could run those transcripts through AI and then start asking questions about, what are the most problems that people face with the websites, or what were they hoping that the product would do for them, and that sort of thing. And then hopefully AI could summarize all of those chats and give you the sort of key pieces of information. So
and
that could be something.
It seems like Microsoft are already on the case with this. I think it's also called Copilot or something like that.
Where it looks at all your business things.
Yeah, it basically looks at everything within your Microsoft 365 and sticks a ChatGPT style AI on top of it, so you can just ask it anything, query anything, ask, like, gives you insights on this, that, and the other thing. Like what day does client X respond to fastest, or I don't know. Like, you just imagine how ultimately powerful that is. And Google, especially, I'm sort of surprised that Google seem way behind on this. We looked for it yesterday, didn't we, for the Google kind of business suite? They don't seem to have it. They had something, but it didn't seem to be very consumer focused. It was dev focused at this point.
Yeah, I think it's probably not quite in the right stage, is it yet? But it seems as though they're on it, but they're not got something ready at this point. So
yes,
we'll see. Yeah. It seems as though like that's an obvious thing, just to copy Microsoft and do something that's the same, because it's the same product, really, isn't it? So
well, and you can imagine with the autocomplete, like Gmail does a pretty good job already. Well, it does a pretty good job. It's very, very basic. You don't really use Gmail, you use your own email client. But when I'm writing an email in Gmail, it'll suggest autocompletes for the end of a line of text. So it knows I'm about to write kind regards. It knows I'm about to write, whatever, hello, such and such. But, we do a lot of support, so we're getting the same kind of questions in. So how long is it? Presumably not very long before within Gmail, it understands the question that's being asked by the customer and actually knows the answer faster than we do, because it's read through all the emails, all of our support documentation, all of our whatever else, and it just be like, well, here's the answer, just like ChatGPT does for so much already.
Yeah, be good. It'll be there. It'll be coming.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Let's move on to our next topic, which was quoting for a piece of work. So we had one of our customers wanted to build a new, I call it like a page template, essentially, in WordPress. These days, you might not build it like that with blocks and so forth, but they had a design. They wanted to improve the sort of landing page for insights or resources or blogs or something like that, and sort of bring different content types together in sort of one landing page. And we spent some time chatting with them about the requirements. They got a design to us. We gave some feedback on the design, and then we gave a quote. And what happened then, Keith?
I wasn't surprised by what happened next. The quote felt high to me, in the sense that I knew it was justified, because the approach that we were going to have to take was going to take like approximately X amount of time, and hence we charged X amount.
And there were lots of new elements on this page design that we would have to build. Like, we couldn't reuse them from the existing designs. Yep. And that was part of the discussion, that the client wanted this to be different from the rest of the stuff.
Exactly. But basically, we got not the dreaded email, but, we got the response. This was much higher than I expected. Can you please? I think how long will this take you? Was the question. How long are you expecting this to take? Yeah. Which is a very, very dangerous question, like dangerous territory. A, because we're not charging by the hour, and B, because it shows that the kind of trust there is potentially fallen down. Because in a way, why does that matter? Do you know? Like, is this worth it to you or not, kind of thing? But I guess it does, people don't want to feel like they're getting taken advantage of. And I sort of understand why she may have felt that. So we did defend it to an extent, because I didn't want to just say, it is what it is, take it or leave it, because I didn't really feel like that was fair. So I did say, look, we have to build this in this way. We can't use blocks for it. So we are building something from scratch. The styles are different. I'm not going to be able to, everything is new. It's almost like building half a new website. Not quite, but like it's getting there. There's a lot of work. And we'd already had 2 hours worth of calls or something on our time, calls with both of us on, conversations between you and me about how we're going to achieve this, what's the best way forward. The quote to me felt in that sense justified, but I could see why it seemed very expensive, because it was very expensive. And that's what I said. And then I said, if you do want me, their response to that was, is there a way you can do it cheaper? Can you use the block editor so that we can reuse things that we already have? It doesn't need to look exactly like the designs. I was kind of thinking it would be more around this kind of mark, which was half of our quote. Was half? It was half, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Which didn't leave us a lot of time, So I basically replied and said, look, I can try going down that route. It would be on an hourly basis. I effectively have 2 hours to work and build you this template. I don't think I'm going to get it done in time. I don't think you're going to like the end results. But I'm willing to give it a go. But I'm willing to give it my best shot, and I would give it my best shot. Like if they paid for that and that's what they wanted to do, I'm not going to sit and be like, oh, I don't want. I'll do my best. But I'm experienced enough to know what I can and can't achieve in that time. And I know this client well enough to know that they're quite particular. They're not particular when they're giving you the quote. Oh, it doesn't matter if it's this or that. And then whenever you deliver something, it's like, no, that's not right. That's not right. This needs change. That needs change. So, anyway. So I put that on the table and said, I'll do 2 hours worth of work. And they've come back just about an hour ago and said, no, we'll go with the original.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
That's good, I think.
Yeah, basically, I've spoken to the boss, explained why it's pricey, we'll need it to be finished professionally, etc. So they're happy to go ahead. So, I mean, I don't know what the lesson is there. I think
the lesson...
This stuff's hard.
Yeah, I think the lesson is that this stuff is hard. And I guess the outcome, I think, is the right outcome for everybody. Because I don't think the outcome of having a go at it for 2 hours would have actually been what the client wants.
No.
So we're going to get the right outcome. And therefore, I think probably the way we handle that is probably all right, actually.
Yeah. How do our listening along, how do you deal with that? If someone objects to a price and basically says that it's too expensive, how do you normally go about dealing with that situation? I'd really love to know from people watching, because I think everyone could learn from this because it happens a lot, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One more topic I think we've got extensibility in plugins and themes with WordPress. I think this, I'm not sure why we added this. Why did we have this?
We added this because your brain's a bit fuzzy today, Mark, I think, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We added this one because you had a tweet about anonymous functions being used to register hooks or something.
That's right. That got people very passionate about defending their way of doing it, which was...
but also a lot of agreement.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I think when I read the tweet back... Let me just get the tweet up and that's what it actually was. It said in the tweet, I do wish developers would stop using WordPress hooks with brackets what I think are called anonymous functions like this. And then I give a little example and a little image. They are very hard, if not impossible, to unhook. So if you're a developer and you have this stuff hooked into something, if it doesn't have a name, a function name, it's very difficult to unhook. People started throwing reasons as to how you can unhook them. They were very convoluted and difficult. And then people started defending the idea of some people like to use them because if it's a very short function like returning a number or something for something, then you could potentially do that. And then some people were suggesting that it was a good idea because if you actually have a piece of functionality that you don't want someone to unhook because it might break something if you unhook it, then maybe that makes sense.
Yeah. I'd
kind of argue though, and I guess it depends how a plugin's built, but that shouldn't be added as a hook then. If you like, it should be in the code. I don't know. It's difficult to, without seeing the code and understanding it, why is it being added as a hook if it's not something that can be
something critical.
Hookable?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But either way, I just find it very frustrating as a developer when you have things that are hooked in with an anonymous function and I can't unhook them, remove them, can't make that change, which is difficult. So that was partly where it came up. And then I also had a suggestion this morning on our Better Core Video Embeds plugin, which, if you haven't seen it, it's in the repository. What it does is it stops the WordPress site from loading all of the scripts from like YouTube and Vimeo and all those things until that video is actually clicked. So it replaces the video with the thumbnail image and puts a play button over it. And when you click it, then it loads in all the iframe and stuff. And what the suggestion was from the person was that it wasn't accessible because our play icon that sits over the image is just like a div that just says div class play button. It's an empty div, and then I think you styled it with like a pseudo element to put the triangular play icon on it. And they were saying like there's no clickable thing for a screen reader to go at and have a look at. So I went and had a look at it, and it was like, oh, this has been built really well, because I'd actually hooked in all of the elements. So I just created a hook that's like called, output HTML or something like that.
Yeah,
I had a more complicated name than that, but essentially. And then I had callback functions that hooked into that to output the thumbnail, the play icon, the wrapper div, and so forth. So I was able to just get back to this chap and say, I might well put this in the plugin because it's a good idea, but I can't do it like right now and so forth. But here is literally 5 lines of code, 1 line to unhook my function that outputs the play button, and 4 or 5 lines to hook in your own function that outputs a button instead. And it's just a beautiful example of like extensible code and how easy it is to sort of manipulate people's code with WordPress when it's been written extensively. And it was just like one of those moments that was like, oh, it's really nice. That, I'm glad it kind of works as it should do, if you like. So hopefully he might be able to go away and do that for his site, and then maybe I can add that to the plugin at a later date.
Yeah, really cool. Very good example. Cameron has said a few things, Mark. I don't know if you want to address couple of his comments.
I use anonymous callbacks for my own stuff, but never in something that is distributed. Yeah, a lot of people essentially said the same thing.
Yep.
That if you're using it for yourself, then it's yours, isn't it? I'd argue that it's still easy to unhook and hook, so why not just give it a name? But I mean, that's your own personal choice, of course. And then he also said, you're right, they're a nightmare to unhook and it's bad practice. So when you're distributing a plugin, that's definitely true. I do use it on my own custom stuff because if someone is wanting to hook it at that point, then they'll have access to the code base, then they can just delete it instead. I do use it on my own custom stuff because if someone was wanting to unhook it at that point, then they'll have access to the code base, right, got you? So they can just change the code itself, meaning that. But like in this instance, you don't want to be changing the plugin because obviously if I resubmit the plugin for an update, then whatever they change would just disappear in a WordPress.org distributed plugin. But as I said, it depends what the code base is. It depends what the project is. And it depends on a lot of things. But it was just interesting that it got a lot of people, what's the word? Interested in putting their opinion forward, which was good.
Yeah.
It was a tweet that everyone seemed to want to jump into and put their opinion in. But lots defending it, lots saying it was right. And lots, essentially what I think is the right answer is that there's times when it's fine and there's times when it isn't. So pick the times to do the right thing, basically.
Absolutely. I think it's time to wrap it up for the day. As always, thank you so much for joining us for today's show. Thanks for watching along live on YouTube and your comments. Thanks for listening on the podcast. We really do appreciate it. We will be back next week. If you don't want to miss that show, please consider subscribing. And if you want to support the show, because we are a little tiny show, we don't get loads of people, which isn't a mega problem. But if you do think somebody else would be interested in watching this kind of content, please consider a like on YouTube. That doesn't take long. Or maybe even like tweeting out something that we do, retweeting something would be really, really nice. A bit of social media love. We're not too good at that ourselves, but that would be great. Otherwise, see you next week.
Bye-bye.